Hello and welcome to another week of BlackLantic. Love in the backgrounds. This is all real. We are in person again, always in a different location. I'm Clinton. This is Hillary.
I will shout out that we're at Toronto Designers Market on 50 Bloor Street West. Our friends Karen and Tyler. Oh, this beautiful spot. Well, technically it's Karen, but family. And if ever you're in the area at the Holt Renfrew Center and you go down the escalators of the Aritzia, you turn to the left and then you're here at this beautiful place. So thank you for sponsoring our location. But enough about that. We're here in person.
Yep, and this week we'll be interviewing Husoni Raymond. So, let's go. BlackLantic Media acknowledges that it carries out its work on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Pescotubacadi peoples.
I would also like to acknowledge that I am seated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people.
Welcome back. Husoni, we're so excited to finally have you on the show.
And finally meet in person.
I know.
I gave you a hug when I showed up, like I was seeing you again, and that was just such an odd part about the pandemic.
Yeah,
like you see someone on Zoom calls enough times, and you feel like you must.
Yeah.
So good to meet you.
So true.
To be fair, I met you first at BlackLantic Initiative.
Oh, wait, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I don't think that you and I had really connected online before through Advocacy. Like, I'd heard your name. We did one call about the continuum, but I heard, about your work and that you were such a force in the community, and then you were gone. But then you came here.
Episode on...
the show before this show that remains unnamed.
that part.
We'll tell you the tea after we're done recording.
I forgot about that. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? I must not have been on the show.
I'm trying to remember.
Time escapes
I don't know,
us.
I don't know. That was
That's
like 3
okay.
years ago.
Husoni Raymond, it's very great to have you on the show. We know who you are very well, although not all of our listeners will. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what life's been like for you so far?
Well, yeah.
No pressure.
I know, that's such a big question. My name is Husoni Raymond. I am originally from Kingston, Jamaica. I moved to Atlantic Canada in 2016, I want to say, for my undergrad university, which is like a completely different story. Random decision. I can talk about how a small decision can change your entire life. Anyways, I went to St. Thomas University for my undergrad. I graduated in 2020. Then I worked for the New Brunswick Multicultural Council as a manager of anti-racism initiatives for a year and did some organizing in the community, and I moved to Toronto in 2021 for law school, and now I'm done. So yeah, I just wrote the first bar exam yesterday, so one more left.
Congratulations. Thanks for finding time to chat with us in the middle of that hecticness.
And you don't seem too down or upset about having just written the bar yesterday, so
I mean,
you're feeling pretty good.
Well, in life, you just roll with the punches. If whatever happens, we're adaptable, we're resilient, and we pull from the resilience of our ancestors and people who have done hard things before. Hardship is not new, challenges are not new. So I think I just go with the flow, and if a problem arises, if I don't pass, then I'll retake it. But I'm optimistic, of course.
Only positive energy.
Only positive. Yeah.
So tell us, I guess, a little bit about what you just hinted to in terms of how a small decision can be such a big life decision, and of course why you chose New Brunswick to come to and why you chose St. Thomas University for your undergrad. Or maybe even to what was Kingston like before you made this choice?
Yeah, okay. That's a,
You said that's what you
oh my gosh.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, it was different. I was young, I was 19. I was working full time, but also finishing up some courses that you're supposed to do in high school. And I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I was involved in a lot of community development stuff in Jamaica, and participated in a lot of national youth advocacy initiatives. One that stands out to me is when my community youth group, we applied for like a grant for a rights awareness program, and we conducted workshops in my community about police violence, which was like a very prevalent issue. And it's more of a socioeconomic issue in Jamaica, where low-income people are often subjected to police violence, and also a racial issue, again, in the context of like global anti-Black racism and like the legacy of colonialism in Jamaica. So it's like very complex. Anyways, I was involved in like a lot of youth groups, and I knew I wanted to use my voice for something, because when I started doing a course in law in high school, I learned about like the Constitution and like how, you know, the power of the judiciary in, you know, protecting the rights of people, but obviously that's not always the case. But just the power that law has to shape, you know, society, and the law actually shapes like how we interact with each other, just so many things. So I knew I wanted to do law, blah, blah, blah. And then anyways, I applied to law school in Jamaica. But then one day I was on my lunch break, and one of my friends messaged me, and she was like, do you want to attend this, can you follow me to this Canadian college fair? And I was like, I had like 30 minutes of my lunch left, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure, it's like, was down the street, and I followed her to the college fair, and then I wasn't interested. I never thought about studying in Canada, but I saw this thing like small university of big opportunities, and I was like, oh, what opportunities are, I was like, what opportunities are you offering? So I went over and I spoke to the person, and it was a good conversation, but then they talked about like, Stu's emphasis on like social justice and social inclusion, and it's the only exclusively liberal arts university. And I was like, okay, this is my, you know, this is what I'm interested in. So I applied, only university I applied to in Canada, and I got accepted, and I got a scholarship, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And it's history from there.
Amazing. I'm curious about Stu's philosophy, because as someone who like grew up in New Brunswick, did you find that to ring true once you were there, like living it, that it is that social justice-y school?
I think that it definitely attracts that type of people. Okay. Like the students are very social justice oriented, and also I think like a lot of the professors and people there care about social justice issues, but obviously like we're all learning and growing. So there were, for instance, in my first year when I went there, I joined the student union, and then during February, there was no acknowledgement for Black History Month, not by the student union, not by the university. And that came as a shock to me, because I was like, wait, this was like, I thought this was like social justice, social inclusion, but like we're not celebrating like Black Canadians. I'm not seeing anything about like the contributions of Black people in Atlantic Canada. So then I, you know, spoke up about it, and then I ended up in a CBC article, and then I was getting all these hate comments, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just moved here, like, what's going on? And then, you know, there's one thing to like, you know, complain and point out a problem, but then like, you know, I think another step is like, what do you do about it? You know, it's like good to point out issues, but like if you have skills and experience, or like, you know, the time, like you should also contribute to fixing it. So like in subsequent years, like we worked with the university administration and like planned like Black History Month events. Like the first year that we planned it, like over 300 people came, and we brought in like someone from Black Lives Matter Toronto, like Dr. Mary Louise McCarthy Brand came in, and Alexa from Black Space Winnipeg. And you know, since then, you know, there's always been Black History Month events at STU since then. So
I want to ask one more question before I let you go, and I'm so sorry, but
that's okay. It's not even a question. So just a comment. I found it so fitting that you included the word time, if you have the time, because I often say that I feel like it's almost intentional to keep us so busy, so stressed out with bills and things to do, and entertainment and distractions, and none of us just have the time to speak out, and that's probably why the Black Lives Matter movement got so big during 2020, because everyone was sitting in their house and George Floyd was murdered.
And it's also exhausting, right? Like it takes like a lot of like emotional and financial resources, and I'll be honest, it's not like you don't get a lot of praises all the time. Like you have to do it from passion, but that's why self-care and community is important, and trying to like work with in community rather than like by yourself, because you can't change much, even if you try. But yeah.
To be fair, my question / sort of comment does piggyback off of that, and I think it's more of a comment of something that I find really interesting, and it's the fact that, like, obviously we've interviewed so many people at this point, and it's sort of, I find it really interesting when immigrants come and they learn about an injustice in this new community, and they still take it upon themselves to do what I consider the right thing, as opposed to being like, oh, these are a different group of people, I maybe don't know their reality or know about them, you see a problem and you do it. And so I'm sort of curious if, like, maybe what in your life made you the type of person to be that, or if it's just part of the social justice being law that made you see this issue. Because I mean, there's a lot of people who would have seen that and would have been like, I'm not St. Thomas's, I'm not the Fredericton Black community, I'm not from here, I'm going to leave this alone. Yeah. But you fixed it, you got hate on it, and now you're still pursuing law, you're still making waves and changes. And so I think it's just a personality thing, but I find it really fascinating.
Yeah, I think, that is a good question. I think, well, first of all, I think it's an understanding that, our struggles are interconnected. And I feel like a lot of people think that there's no anti-Blackness, even in predominantly Black countries. And that's, for me, a big misconception, because a lot of even predominantly Black countries, there's still the legacy of colonialism. So Jamaica was colonized first by the Spanish and then by the British. So, and white people are like, they're white Jamaicans, and growing up, I experienced something, but I didn't know what it was or why it was this way. You'd hear, even in simple conversations with your family, like, oh, you're so Black, like Black was always akin to like being ugly or not being good enough. And you grow up, you see people bleaching their skin, putting all these chemicals to like try to be lighter, to like fit within the Eurocentric like beauty standards. And who was always deemed pretty was like the light-skinned person or like the white people. And I remember my first time when I was young, and the white people came on this mission and they were giving out toys, and all the kids were like, oh my gosh, like not in a bad way, like everyone was just like, oh my gosh, our real world, like it was like God came, So I think understanding that, and then going into high school and learning history and then sociology, and then you realize, okay, the legacy, like when slaves came to Jamaica, they had to assimilate, they had to they go through this process called seasoning, where they had to they were eradicated of their culture. They weren't able to practice their religion, speak their tongue, and speak English. And then throughout the years, that has become like embedded in, like my grandfather was a Rastafarian, and at one point Rastafarians couldn't even wear their hair, the way it grows out of their head. Like the police would literally like trim them. You have just all the negative things associated with Blackness and self-hatred, internalized racism in a predominantly Black country really opened up my eyes. So when I come here, I think the misconception comes from the fact that the white people aren't a majority, but you don't have to be, the dominant group can also be the minority if they have kind of the social and economic capital to still maintain that hierarchy. Because anyways, yeah, whatever. So coming here, making that kind of connection to kind of the systems of power, that it's not like siloed, it's like all connected in like global anti-Blackness and stuff. Anyways, then I think also experiencing racism myself. It's one thing to like hear your mom say like, don't go in the sun because you're gonna get dark, or like all those things that you just saw as like a normal part of like your life. But then coming here and hearing stuff from a white person, now I'm like, okay, like, this really, it was just a different level, because you can sympathize with your own people for the because it's somewhat outside of their control, like access to your education and not knowing the full context. You just grew up knowing Black is bad, and you just, okay, I'm just gonna deal with that. If you didn't have the privilege like to like learn more about the broader systems of power and history that influences people's behavior. But then, yeah, coming here, for instance, in my first year, someone told me, so I knew I wanted to go to law school and I knew I had to work hard. So I was all about getting A's. Like I was like studying like straight A's throughout my entire undergrad. But I remember the first like written paper, I was like anxious because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't know, like this is university, you know, I'm just gonna try my best. But like I'm talking to this my friend, and I say like, I hope I get an A on this paper, like I'm really anxious about it. And he's like, oh, just don't write like a Black person. And I was like, oh, you know, how do Black people write? You know, assuming that Black people are like less intelligent, or like someone saying to me like, oh, I was expecting you to be different, like more gangster, like, you know, more like a thug. And I was like, okay, so like these comments kind of made me realize like the perception of Black people here in Atlantic Canada, but like more broadly, and like being put in a box and being told that, you know, I'm not smart, and, you know, I'm not supposed to sound articulate, or I'm not supposed to write well for a Black, like I'm some kind of exception, you know. So I think those experiences myself, kind of feeling the sting of racism and being an immigrant myself, also propelled me to kind of investigate more. And it's also a personality thing where it's just like, if I can do something, I'm gonna do it. You know, I don't see it as like, oh, I'm doing this big thing. Like sometimes people say like, Husoni, you did this or you did that, but I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was like such a big deal. You know, it was just like, okay, I saw that we needed this programming, and I didn't see like when people made those comments to me and stuff, like sometimes, you know, I was just like, you're just ignorant. They're probably never seen a Black person. They watch TV and they see all these stereotypes of Black people and they just assume that's, you know, and then the erasure of Black history in New Brunswick. That's why I was also like heavily involved in that kind of work, because I realized that was also a part of this broader systemic problem. So anyways, yeah, so I think it was like the personal experiences of racism, but also understanding how it connects with, you know, the kind of internalized racism that I experienced while growing up.
I'm so floored, and just like, I think that there's so many things that I could extrapolate on and like takeaways, but I also think that just the maturity to be able to have so much sympathy and compassion for what you experienced in Jamaica is what's like really resonating to me, because it's like that takes a whole other level of understanding to be like, I heard these things, but I completely understand the situation as to why, as opposed to having any resentment or anger. Like I'm just
yeah, that was great to listen to, the way you pulled from so many different truths from the globe to Jamaica to New Brunswick, and brought it all together in one conversation. So I guess what I'm hearing is you're saying, just from the global agenda of anti-Black hatred, that you experienced the way it affected multi-generations of people who have systematically had their culture erased from them until they forgot who they were, and also conditioned to be subjective to the power struggle. And you saw how the shadism kind of Black hatred there, and then you came here and then you saw the, you know, Euro descendant anti-Black racism, and it all just kind of came together. And you kind of answered something I always ask, and like, what was it like to come to a completely different culture than you were used to? And you did answer a big part of that. But and it's okay to, I've made excuses for people like for their uninformed ignorance, like maybe before high-speed internet, or maybe before 10 years after high-speed internet. And I guess it's not so black and white for lack of a better word, but yeah, we talk about it all the time. Like people in Atlantic Canada, their only exposure to culture has been through gangster rap, which would have been highly misunderstood what the point of it was to begin with. Shows like Cops, and you know, the latest murder in North Preston, Halifax, or something. So what was it like for you? Like, that's such a shocking comment alone. Just don't like a Black person, because what does a Black person? Black is one of the most diverse.
Exactly.
Things. What was it like? So other than worked really hard.
Yeah. I mean,
culture shock, if there was any?
I feel like I feel like the climate, that was definitely like a big thing. Like I was literally wearing like a sweater in August. Like I came here because in Jamaica it's like in the summer it goes to like high 30s, like maybe 40 degrees, and like here it was like 28, 24. I was like, this is like chilly. I was like wearing a jacket, but now like that would be hot for me too. But I think the climate was one thing. But other than that, I think nothing really shocked me that much in terms of like language and like, you know, you like Canada, like it's kind of similar to America, and a lot of the food kind of was kind of like not what I was used to. Yeah, like poutine. I was like, what the hell is this? But now it's like it's good. It's not bad. Not my meal, not my meal of choice, but like I can get with it. I can eat a little poutine once in a while. And I think it's just like being. I think the major thing was like being different. You know, like even though in Jamaica, like I still understood like the power dynamics that were at play, and like, you know, colonialism and all of that, you know, you still were the majority. You still like saw people that looked like you. No one was curious about you in the way that, you know, people are curious or will comment on you here, you know, like everyone's black, so no one's like, oh, like
your hair,
let me touch your hair, or like ask, you know, like you're kind of like exotic, or so I think that was kind of like the biggest part of it was just like being visibly, I couldn't like blend in as like easily, like you always were the obvious you know, like everywhere, like, you know. And when I just came to STU, there was like 4 other black people, I want to say, so like
So we're attracting a lot of international students.
Now it's different. Pardon?
What year was that?
2016.
Right?
Yeah, there was only like one other student from Jamaica, and then he ended up having to leave. And anyways, it was just like most of the parties, most of the courses, like everywhere, it was just like I was the black person, you know?
Wow. So from that moment of like realizing there's no Black History Month, pushing for advocacy, obviously like we know you through the Black advocacy that you were able to do in New Brunswick. So for anyone who doesn't know, talk through like I feel like you've partnered with so many associations, you've been on like boards and committees and different things. So tell everyone like the laundry list of like the reach and impact that you've had on the New Brunswick community.
Don't kill me.
Well, you have.
I don't know about that, but I think at STU, I think it first started with, you know, the Black History Month stuff, and I feel like there were a lot of people that like supported me during that time, you know, like there was this human rights teacher, Dr. Shirley and Dr. Amanda DePaulo, and I was like, you know, I think we should do something like I want to plan this thing, and I was like, okay, but I want, like, we need money to bring these people in and blah, blah, blah. And then I started raising money by like writing fundraising letters and like sending it to like the departments, asking each of them for like $500 each, and then like meeting with them and like, you know, telling them the importance. And I remember the first commitment I got the year before was like $100 from like one department. They were like, okay, next year we can do something, and like I'll put like $100 in our budget. And I remember thinking like, do you think that can do anything? Like in my mind, I was like, okay, like my plan, what I have is like much bigger than whatever you have in mind. And then then the following year, actually a first year Black student came, and Dorcas and or human rights professor like introduced us, and I was like, okay, I'm bringing you on board, and you know, who do I like, just researching like who, and I learned so much. I was like, who can I bring? Because I was like, okay, I want to bring Black people here to speak about something, but then I didn't even know the Black people in Canada. I was like, who are the influential people? I was like, what's, you know, being Black in New Brunswick as like a Black New Brunswicker, because it was so irate. Like I didn't even know like the long legacy of like Black history in New Brunswick, you know.
That was sort of also my
Absolutely.
thought, because when I was asking about like how do you tackle, I guess, being a change maker in a community that you're not from, part of my thought about that is like, we've been doing this for 3 years and I only know Black influential people now, and I lived there for 23 years. So to come, have been there for like 6 months and been like, I'm taking on this thing. I'm like, how do you even find out who Mary Louise is?
Yeah,
You know what
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
what was that like, doing that research?
I mean, yeah, I was just like asking around, like, you know, do you know any
Do you know
Black
the
people?
next?
Like,
Where are
they
the
were
Blacks?
like, you know, barely any Black professors. I was like, you know, just asking around, seeing like who and just Googling. I was like Googling like, you know, Black figure, like Black people in whatever. And I think I came across Mary Louise because she did her human rights claim against Shoppers Drug Mart when she lived in Toronto, and she faced racial profiling and she won. So I think I found her on Google and I reached out to her. Now she's like kind of like my second mom here. And I reached out to her, and then obviously I found out at Black Lives Matter Toronto, and I reached out to them, and then my human rights professor knew Alex Joy from Winnipeg because they went to school together or something, so she introduced me to her. So it was really just like doing the digging and like going to find the information, and I wanted to make sure that I did have that representation of like the local Black community of what, because I realized that like no one really was talking about like racism, and you know, anytime I mentioned it, people would think that like, oh, it's not real, like you're just trying to start conflict here. Like that first news article that CBC wrote, that I did that interview, and then that's when I learned about like media and whatever, because I did this interview like innocent me, like not really, like I wasn't like deliberately trying to like stir the pot or anything. Like I was just like talking about my experience, but then the news article went out. International students say microaggressions and racism prevalent in New Brunswick. And then I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's gonna hate me now. Like I'm gonna be like the shit disturber. And then I already was known as the person like causing problems. And I was like, literally, I'm not even doing anything. I'm just talking about like my experience. Anyways, I read the comments and I was like, oh my gosh, like they were like, go back home. Like, why did you come here? You're just making stuff up and like causing division and all these things. And I was like, oh, like, I don't know, but it gave me a thick skin.
But also that clickbait title did you dirty. Like,
I know.
Well, welcome to the news.
We have
I know, but that's
some
the news, right? You learn that like after that, I was like, okay, you gotta make sure before every interview you have your key messages. And I also learned that from like student government. Like I became involved in the student union and student advocacy, and I was talking about student issues and stuff. But you gotta, I learned very quickly that you gotta know your messaging, because like the clickbait will, obviously from a reporter standpoint, you want to get, you know, as much attention.
You don't care about
So anyways,
all the wildness of everything you've said so far, though, speaks to, I guess, undeniable truth that some things have changed in New Brunswick in the past
exactly.
8 years,
Yeah.
right? So there's no way to find resources. Racism was denied. Even the idea that slavery happened in Canada, let alone in Brunswick, was denied. There's always going to be hate comments, but I don't think you see a lot less of the go home comments. It's people, like,
it's definitely much, and so much more Black people like there, and like people like speaking about, and I feel like it's become like except like during Black History Month there was literally nothing like when I was literally shocked, and now like there's the city's doing a flag raising, like, you know, the government is doing all, so it's like it's really encouraging to see like all the progress we made, like thanks to like our community like speaking up and you know, not being afraid of being the shit disturber and being like told to go back home, and you know, all those, you know, hurtful things where it's like it doesn't come from like, my critique didn't come from like a place of like trying to harm or insult anyone. It was just trying to make our community better, right?
You're just disturbing the shit of the white people who
exactly.
technically had shit on the
We're
community first.
Exactly.
They're the ones who caused the problem.
Exactly.
But so you weren't even from there, and that's what Hillary said. And I think you agree that sometimes maybe people from countries outside Canada who aren't so focused on the individualistic nature and more community, and you did a lot of work in community, it's interesting that through you and your work that I'm going to bring up is how I started to learn about New Brunswick history in the province that I've been in for 12 years. You played an integral part in the creation of a website, and I don't know if it's still up.
Yeah, it's still up, yeah.
That was an amazing resource of Black history in New Brunswick, and shout out to all the Black history organizations that are doing amazing work, but I hadn't come across it. I hadn't, like the Black Historical Society and other organizations as well. They did the same work you did before, but I guess it hadn't reached me. And so that website was really well put together. And you want to talk a little bit about your work with that website?
Yeah, for sure.
Was there a website? Sorry, I guess there were websites similar to, but yeah, why don't you talk about the one that you did?
Yeah, I don't know. So I think that came from obviously always knowing that there's been an erasure of, Black people in Atlantic Canada, and connecting with like Dr. Mary Louise McCarthy, and she was like the past president of the New Brunswick Black History Society. And then after that first panel that we did, we went to lunch, and she's like, "Oh, my son," and blah blah blah, and we got each other's number. And then and then Tonduit, and she was telling me about like fifth generation and like all of this, and I was like, oh, Black people have been here for like obviously like I was like, okay, there's slavery in Canada, obviously. There were Black people here and the Black loyalists and all of that, but like it never really like
a lot of Canadians.
It never clicked, and no one talked about it, and like also too, why it was so shocking to me is because people kept labeling me as an outsider, which like sometimes I have an accent, but I'm like, okay, obviously people always assume I'm an outsider, so there must not be like a rich Black history here. If like, because like if you go to another country that there are like a lot of Black people, like if you go to like they're not assuming, okay, you're an immigrant Black person, they'll just be like, oh, you're just a Black people person here. And also the microaggressions I was facing and stuff, it was like, okay, these people have never really interacted with Black or learned about Black people anyways. So I feel like that kind of made me realize that there was a gap in education, right? Like a lot of, like I try to see it as like, what's a systemic issue rather than like an individual sometimes. And in this context, it was like, okay, there's just like, and also people can Google, but like sometimes you just gotta make things clear, So I recognized that from my undergrad years, which is why we did all these Black History Month campaigns and like programming and like talks and whatever. But then when I graduated, and then 2020, and then there's this big march, and we, it was, I want to say like 20 community members that after the march downtown, we, I was like, okay, what are we gonna do next? It can't just be like this noise and, like this protest, and the white people came out and they put up their signs and they're like, okay, I feel good now. Like, okay, I feel relieved of like the racism, and we're all good. We need to like build on this momentum and like do more. Like we can't just leave it at this. Like this didn't change, racism. So, we were talking, and then from what we were discussing, like I think 4 major things stuck out to me, and I turned that into like a petition, and then I was working with like Mina and Tandwe, and then we were getting signatures. Like we had like 4 calls to actions, I think, to the government of New Brunswick, and like 5 to like the city of Fredericton, and one of them was to incorporate Black history within the public school curriculum. So that got like thousands of signatures, and then like we were requesting a meeting with the premier, and then we were meeting with like other politicians and like talking about these calls to actions. But basically what we heard back was like, oh, it's gonna take a long time for Black history to be put in the curriculum, a long time, in like 3 to 5 years, they were saying. And you guys have been on the consultation, which has been like, it took like 2 years to like just do the
calls to action, the reason the continuum exists.
I don't want to say it's the only thing that contributed to it, but like we were the first to call for it, and also meet with we met with Premier Higgs, we met with Dominic Cardi at the time, and like wrote this like entire proposal that we submitted to her. It's on the Black Lives Matter Fredericton Instagram page. And then after that, we were invited to like join this committee. But when they invited us to join, they made it clear that like this is not gonna. They can't, obviously with all the bureaucracy and whatever of government, it's like we can't put it up like next February. And I was like, okay, well, we can do this systemic thing and like do this long-term plan, but we also need something now, you know? So that's where Alicia, who was a PhD candidate, Dr. Funky Ajadabe, was also a history professor at UNB. And she was actually on the first Black History Month panel. So she connected me with Alicia, who was like a curriculum. She specializes in like education. Okay. So I was like, Alicia, okay, we need to do like some kind of create some, like break it down. Like, you know, instead of just providing the information, the teachers don't know how to, not that they know, they can do it, but it's like the easier you can do it for people that the lesson plan is already there, all they need to do is like download it and it's good. And then we had Dr. Casey Bookholder, who is like a professor at UMB too in education. And then we just had a meeting and we were like, okay, let's start with like, let's just do some like lesson plans. And then I reached out to Stu, and then we got through the internship program, we got an intern to like start doing some of the research, and then they applied for a grant, and then we were just like, doing lessons plan. They were doing lesson plan, and we did like self-films too. It's on the website, like about people's experiences, and it just progressed over I think the major aim was to just like, we need information in the schools now. The government is saying 3 to 5 years. Like people are going to be graduated by then. So like, let's make information available now for the teachers to just go and like look it up, and it's already like a lesson plan. All the links and information is also there for people that just want to read, and like all the other resources. So that's how like that website came about. Was really just like, okay, we wanted this, and the government was saying like, it's going to take this like time, and obviously you appreciate that. And I love working with her name was just
Kate.
In my mind.
Kate,
yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how the Black History Resource website came to life.
Wow.
Incredible. Shout out, Kate.
Yeah, shout out, Kate. Yeah.
I know.
Her last name escapes me for a moment.
I said it. Shout out.
Shout out. Yeah.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah,
and we'll actually
we're
watch the
still-
show.
Oh,
And we're
yeah,
still
yeah,
working
yeah.
on this.
Yeah, I know. I see the emails, and I'm like, okay, law school took me over a little bit. And I was like, I should probably join one of these meetings sometime.
And I am curious that I like had sort of asked you before, but when you first started that, were you not a representative for Prude there?
No,
No.
That was Damien.
Damien's
And I was
there.
for Black Lives Matter Fredericton.
Exactly.
But we did like a lot of the initial before it became like broader community. I don't remember who exactly was on it, but like I know like I think Clinton, you were on it early in it too, but like we had to, and I remember the curriculum, because before it was not like community based organization. Before it was just like individuals, and then like they were just sending us the documents, and I was just like, Black history could be here, like we could like provide like all of this. Before it was like individual curriculums, before we started doing like the continuum. And then I also reached out to Natasha Henry, who just graduated with her PhD, and she was the president of the Ontario Black History Society.
Okay.
So I connected with her, and like also involved her in like the first initial like reviews of the documents, and then it became like this entire committee, and then we started going from there. Then law school took over, and I was like,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where are we at? Do you wanna talk any more about Atlantic Canada? Because there is this whole other chapter of your life.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to cover before we move on to
No, I love that. I feel like while
You ever go back for a visit?
there's I want to go back. Actually, the Emancipation Day was something like that was so like historic, and like in Jamaica, that's a national holiday. So like seeing it was not here, and like the work that the community did in like establishing that, like I want to go back. Actually, Yusuf was here. Like we worked together on the first Emancipation Day. It was Black Lives Matter Fredericton, the Black New Brunswick African Association and the Black Artists Alliance. Like we worked on that together, and it was like, yeah. So I want to go back for the upcoming one, but I feel like I missed the kind of community vibe of like Atlantic Canada that
we are talking about figuring out a cookout to celebrate the continuum, I think, on Emancipation Day, so you gotta come to that. You gotta be the chef.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
I don't know about that one, but yeah.
Before we go to Toronto,
Are you a great cook?
go to bed. That's a good question. Are you a good cook?
Yeah, I can cook a little.
So, yeah, tell us about. We're at 40 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I just want to ask if you ever go back to Jamaica.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I my entire family's there, so yeah. Actually, my sister's actually in New Brunswick now. She's at Mount Allison, which is also a weird thing. Like when I graduated and I was moving, I'd say she followed in my footsteps. And yeah, just kidding. She came here. She's way smarter than me. She's doing like math and like she does like physics and math and like all of that. And I'm like, girl, I don't understand. But funny enough,
older
like
siblings?
No, younger.
Sisters?
Oh yeah, I do have older.
Oh, okay,
I have
okay.
one older
Okay,
sister. She's married with she's married.
Cool.
And great.
So
And
I want to talk about Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, like, how has Jamaica changed since you moved away in 2016?
I don't know.
Feels-
Honestly, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how
No
it's
problem.
changed. I don't want to comment on it, but like maybe
You don't have to.
yeah, I feel like it's such a well, obviously everyone has a unique experience, but like moving, like it's like having a home in two separate
That's
places,
true.
you know,
Yeah.
like, you know,
I'm
it's
visiting
like,
my home right now.
yeah,
but
it's like,
I'm away from
exactly.
home.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like that's where like I was like I grew up. I have like all my childhood friends, all my family, like everyone. And then I moved here like by myself, and then now like New Brunswick also like became like a home. Like all the people I got to work with and meet, and like you know you get a lot of hate, but you also get like a lot of support. Like a lot of white people will come and like, what can I do? How can I support you? Blah blah blah, and like you know the black community as well. Like Mary would invite us for like dinner, and like you know you're like, oh my gosh, like I feel you know at home here. So it's just like always, and then you see your like my nephew and my nieces, like they're just growing up like so fast, like, and I'm like you know not being there to like see them like grow. But and again I can go back to like talking about like the impacts of like global capitalism and like you know limited opportunities, and how you know developing countries like predominantly black countries, their movement is restricted here, but also all the capital like from slavery, all the money that was being made was being shipped here. And even currently you know one of Jamaica's greatest resources is tourism, but a lot of those resorts are not owned locally, and the money is not going to like local community. It's literally still being like brought back here. So then when we limit like economic opportunity for people, they're forced to like leave their families behind to like come to the cold and you know try to make something here at the cost of like the experience of like being with their loved ones and like seeing them grow, and you know seeing your grandparents grow old, or your nieces and nephews grow up. So you know I think about that a lot.
It's the same thing in many African countries.
Yeah,
Other nations
everywhere.
in the world
Yeah.
they make economic trade deals.
Yeah,
and,
everywhere.
but in where people are black, they just take.
Yeah.
Like here's a couple crumbs.
Yeah,
It's
and
ridiculous.
yeah.
We have about, I'd say, 10 minutes, but
Oh wow.
let's explore
Toronto, Black Law Society, getting awards, the bar
Really?
exam. Tell us.
I feel like Toronto was like very different from New Brunswick. Well, okay. Funny story
Don't say.
is wait. When I a part of the story of how I ended up in Atlantic Canada is that like when she was recruiting me, she said, "Oh, it's like the capital city of Fredericton is like the capital city of New Brunswick."
Fancy.
So me being like 19, I was like capital city in a
Toronto,
first year
Montreal.
country. Like I was thinking like skyscrapers, everything.
Yeah.
When the pilot was like, we'll be landing in 10 minutes, I opened the window and it's like all trees. And I was like, where's the where's the city, you know? So like, I was like, okay, I need to come to Toronto now. That's what I had in mind. And yeah, it's like so much more hustle and bustle, so many more people, so much more diverse, so much like the food, like you can get Jamaican food anytime, like, so Jamaican culture is like literally Toronto culture, like the slang, like, yeah, so like that was like, boom. But yeah, I think also law school came with its own like challenges, like, you know, moving from a different city and then doing some on Zoom and then, you know, yeah, like it was like, yeah. And then hearing like from, yeah, like there's so many diverse perspectives in law school, I put it that way, that, and sometimes, you know, talking about how the law interacts with like race and, you know, socioeconomic status and like people of privilege not really understanding that intersection, or like feeling like you have to, you know, fight to, you know, defend your people or your race. Obviously, I'm not the spokesperson for my race, but like sometimes when we talk about like crime and like racial profiling and all of those stories, or even something as simple as like someone saying like, when we're talking about like diversity on the Supreme Court, people being like, oh, only qualified people shouldn't be like about diversity. And it's like, okay, but you have qualified diverse people, like not only white people are qualified, you know, or even just imposter syndrome of like when I just got accepted to law school, and obviously it's an immense privilege to, you know, go to one of the top law schools in the country, and someone said to me was, oh, you just got in because you were Black. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I literally just got like majority A+ throughout my entire undergrad, plus like community work and all of the like working so hard for your accomplishments to be diminished to like, oh, you're just getting this thing that you've worked hard for, it's just because you're Black. When it's like, okay, if it was because I'm Black, there'd be so many more Black people in law school. There wouldn't be a chronic underrepresentation of Black law students if that's the case. But like it's like a whole different set of battles. But yeah, I got involved with the Black Law Students Association of Canada. First, I planned like the largest conference in our history in Halifax.
Yeah,
2 years ago. With over 500 people, Black legal professionals. We brought them to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which was like truly amazing. And I knew I wanted this conference to like be focused on, so obviously or most of our sponsors are corporate, but I wanted it to be focused on justice. Like I also want to instill one thing that also it doesn't piss me off, but like something that, like obviously having a law degree and being in the legal profession is extremely privileged, and also like any corporate job, you know, but I feel like a lot of times people lose sight of community, like all this promotion about like, oh, Blackness and stuff, it's like surrounded around self-interest. It's like, oh, the promotion and blah, 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 get more Black representation, but that doesn't necessarily translate to like liberation for like all our people. So I kind of want to, obviously like it's good to have representation, but it's not the solution to a lot of the systemic issues that our people face. And I feel like that's what 2020 was about. It was like the power of, you know, community and like grassroots mobilizing, and then it's like translated into like, oh, it's a few of us can just become rich, which is like fine, but and it's more black and white than that, which is something that like I'm also dealing with. But anyways, I wanted to instill that in the attendees about like social justice and social inclusion, and it was amazing, especially in Halifax, which is home to, you know, one of Canada's largest Black communities, and it was just like an amazing experience. We did like a tour of the community and everything. Anyways, and then after that, I became the national president in the past year, which was like also like my team was amazing, and we did like so many projects. Like we're full-time law students, but we organized, like this year's conference beat last year's conference. Last year we had 500. This year we had 600 attendees plus 700 people at our gala. And we literally planned this while being full-time students. We brought in Angela Davis as our keynote speaker. And it was just like mind-blowing experience, yeah.
Are you okay? You're nap. Like, is it coffee? And then you won the award at Black North Initiative, which I want to give you time to highlight. Like, I don't even know what work are you?
I don't know what I really won that award for. Honestly, I don't
amazing?
know. Yeah, I don't know what whoever nominated me, what exactly they said in it, but I'm very grateful for yeah, I'm very grateful that people nominated me and they selected
me. If you don't know why you won, I think you need to watch the show back.
Yeah. So to anyone thinking of immigrating to Canada, just before I ask my last question, do your research, because a lot of the immigrants we meet, they were just told this and that and bedazzled by headhunters or other things like that, and then they come here and it's not what they expected, and that's not exactly what happened to you, but there's nothing they can do about it, right? Especially when families come and stuff like that. In the beginning of the interview, you mentioned that being able to make change requires having time, this is my last question. I don't know if you have any, but I want to go back to that. Because you don't seem to have time.
You've made time.
So what's the driving force that keeps you, no matter where your feet land, you look around and you say, this should be happening, this should be changed. Where's that come from?
Honestly, I don't know, and I ask myself that all the time, because even when I finished, not finished, but after I came here, from all the organizing with Black Lives Matter Fredericton and New Brunswick Multicultural Council, and I feel there's so much work to be done, but also it takes a lot from an interpersonal level, working with other Black people that might share different politics, or it's just oh my gosh, going through, not that I have all the right answers, but I'm doing our best, I'd say. I feel that can be very exhausting, and I always say, okay, I'm wrapping it up. I'm done. I'm gonna take a break. I need to decompress. And then I was there's this opportunity to plan this conference, and I was it can just. This is not too. I feel that's what I underestimate stuff. It doesn't seem big to me. It just seems it's a conference, invite people, book a hotel, blah, blah, blah. I feel that's how tasks seem to me. It doesn't seem so yeah, then I take it on and I was why did I do this to myself? This is so much work for free, you're not, but I feel at the end of the day, what really keeps me going is just, I feel it's just passion. I like being busy, but also the impact that you can have on other people. People attend the conference and they're oh my gosh, this changed my life. I was about to drop out of law school, and then just because they're the only Black student at their law school, and now they had the opportunity to be around Black lawyers, or inviting pre-law students to the conference, and they're I never met a Black lawyer, and now I've seen 200 in the same room, so I feel that kind of inspires me to do whatever you can. I'm not saying everyone should plan a conference or whatever. I'm extra sometimes, and I'm okay, you can do the bare minimum, and that's okay, and that's what I'm trying to do. Actually, I'm trying to prioritize yourself, do enough, but when you can make an impact, do what you can do, do whatever skills you have, whatever is in your power. You guys have excellent interview skills, and you can do a podcast, do that. If you can just write an article, do that. If you can just start give $10 a month to something, do that. I feel if we all do a small thing within what's within our power to do, the world would be so much better. So I think it's just not waiting for someone else to do it, or seeing it and be okay, someone else will do it. I think it's just okay, let's just do that one thing you can do, and can change someone's life, or make not even change their life, but just a small impact on someone else. I think that's amazing.
Wow. I don't have more questions. I'm floored. I'm absolutely floored.
That was
No.
That was a great final thought. Do you have anything? We ask everyone, is there anything else that you feel that we didn't ask you, or that you wanted to relay or communicate before we wrap up this week?
No, thank you for having me. It was so good to be in person, and reminisce about my time in New Brunswick and Fredericton.
For us too, and thanks for your time. I think it's been shown how busy you are, but I think it was really important for us to document, in my opinion, a piece of New Brunswick history that not a lot of people know about and should be documented. And I hope this will stand on YouTube or wherever else for as long as possible. And and you'll probably never move back. So
No,
now
never
it's on
say
the
never. You
Never know. The housing market's a real appeal.
I know. You can't afford anything here.
No, you can't.
Okay.
Amazing. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out all the amazing work that Husoni's doing. Is there a place to find, like, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do next?
I'm just trying to focus on finishing the
Yeah,
bar
lawyer.
exam.
Yeah, you're a lawyer.
I
You're a
know.
lawyer?
And I actually have like the entire July off after I write the bar exam, so I'm trying to make some like a relaxing plan and not doing anything.
Well, I'm going to maintain what I think, which is, like, follow us, but, like, you're going to do something in the campaign that we're going to amplify by August. So keep up with us because we'll obviously amplify everything that you do until the end of, like, time, this company, life.
Yeah.
Those are all at the same time.
Short answer. What area of law have you thought about area of law you're going into?
I'm doing corporate. Should like another story, but like I did immigration, but right now I'm gonna be articling at a corporate law firm
All right.
here in Toronto.
You're gonna do amazing.